This was brought to us by Ars Technica, where they were talking about the case that's occurring right now, where Amazon's voice assistant may actually hold the clues to solving a murder. And this is a brand new area of digital law, where what kind of expectation of privacy do you have if there's a device that's always on, always listening, and always sending information back? And you've got Amazon saying, look, we're not saying we won't give this to you, but you have to show us first, where is the line? When do we give this to you? When is it proper to give it to you, and when is it not? Lou, it's these bright line cases that often decide how this technology is going to be used in coming generations. This seems pretty clear that we'd want to share the information, right? I mean, what could you offer me that says maybe this is not a clear, bright line division between when we share and when we don't?
You know, it's not really clear. I mean, I think that, I think one of the things that you'll notice is that, some of these systems require, like, speak recognition is one of them, is in order for them to improve these systems, they have to sample more and more samplings, right? And in order for them to do that, they have to have the ability to produce and gain those samples. And by people using their devices and their APIs and so on is a way for them to do that. And I think that, like Curtis said, as long as you're securing the data during transfer, there shouldn't be really worry depending on, as long as they're claiming that they're not using it for any advertising or anything like that. So it's all dependent on what the service is claiming it's going to do with this data. But again, then there's the flip side too. There's, the devil's advocate is that, sooner or later, your voice could be your identity. And I think that, it is already, right? So I think that, them sampling this information, and storing it somewhere could be a threat to multiple people. And I think there's also a limitation to how long data should be stored and used for a purpose. And I think that that's one thing that services should be doing, is saying, hey, we're going to take your data, your information, your voice, your identity, and we're going to use it just for research purposes. But then after 120 days or 180 days, we're going to get rid of it. And I think that would help consumers, I think, a little bit more from a privacy perspective, and at least as long as they're doing that, feel a little bit more about helping kind of these services move along. But I think that there's always going to be questions about this and whether we should be sharing, whether we should be sharing.
I like that. That's a very non-knee-jerk reaction. It reminds me, a few years back, Leo Laporte did an episode, I think it was of TWiT, where he showed people exactly what Google was storing every time you use their voice assistant, and then it had your recording. And that kind of shocked people. Some people didn't know that that was actually being recorded. Some people definitely didn't know that you could access that months and months and years later. In this particular case, can you imagine, Curtis, people not knowing that it's not the trigger word that starts the recording, but that it's always being sent. It's, there's always the ability for Amazon to be receiving that stream of data. What's your take? I mean, is it okay with you to take Lou's suggestion and say, look, this is fine as long as we have very clearly defined roles for this data. It can be kept this long, it can be used for this. Or is this a bigger issue that needs to be tackled before voice assistants become entirely mainstream?
I'm going to give you a yes as the answer, because I think that we're looking at two different cases. For the users, the consumers, then I think the answer is no. They have no idea of how this works any more than most consumers 20 years ago could have told you in any real term how the circuit switch telephone system worked. They just know that it works. They trust that the companies will not hurt them, and they'll just sprinkle it with pixie dust and see everything working well. On the enterprise, it's a different story, because the enterprise should have people in IT who do know how this works, who do look at things like the EULAs, who do understand what the policies are, not only within the enterprise, but at the cloud partners. And I think for enterprise customers who are now beginning to use this, there need to be some very clear things spelled out, especially as involve regulatory compliance in both the financial and the healthcare industries, about precisely how these devices can be used and precisely what needs to happen before that use can expand.